Welcome back to Rocky Unscripted. So glad you guys are listening. This is the podcast where we talk about faith when Sunday is over. And today I'm joined by several guests, but immediately to my right is Mitch Comstead. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Nick, for having me back.
We've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, 6 months or so, where we say, let's do an Enneagram podcast, but let's take individual shows and spend the entire show on one specific type.
Which is really what you need to do to get anywhere.
Yes.
And dive deeper into the Enneagram.
It's so complex. There's so many things that are involved with it. But I think both of us said we want to talk about instincts that influence types and that form into subtypes. Mm-hmm. And so we've. If you haven't listened to the intro episode that we just released a little while ago, make sure you go back and listen to that. But Mitch, you are a certified Enneagram coach. That is why you're the expert on our podcast. Now, what does that mean? How do you help people with that?
Yeah, I love to sit down with individuals, leaders, and I want to help them become the best leader that they can be for their organization, and to understand what makes them tick, and to become a leader that everybody else looks at them like, I want to follow that person. Mm-hmm. And then working with teams and businesses, I want people to be able to say when we're done that, wow, I want to help you create and be the team that everybody else is looking to. Like, I want to be on that team. How do I get to be on that team? And so it's using the tool of the Enneagram, but then it's a lot of leadership development as a part of that. So my focus is really on that leadership, and then owning helping them to accelerate in their business.
Love it. I think a lot of businesses could benefit from that, and they probably need to. That's probably long overdue, right? But I'm also joined by two other guests that we roped into being on the show today. We have Shelby and Joel. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
Yeah, right on. Okay, I want to hear, I know you guys, but a lot of our listeners don't know you yet. So if you could give us a snapshot of what life looks like right now, kids, work, whatever, you got to fill in the blank. What are your interests? I don't know. You can answer any one of those series of questions. Joel, how about we start with you? What's life look like right now?
A circus is the best word that I come up with.
Okay.
Which role do you play in the circus?
I am not the ringleader.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm more of like the flying trapeze. Yeah.
Wow, dude, that's cool.
Yeah,
I feel like there's probably a lot of symbolism in that. We should go through. Okay.
Should dig deeper into
Exactly.
No, so I've got 3 kids, Nolan, Trevor, and Elise, 10, 8, and 6. And so they keep us extremely busy. You guys know all about that. And a wife. We've been married. Actually, next week is 11 years.
So congratulations!
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
So, what do you do? What does work look like?
Oh, that one's more complicated. So it's always hard to shrink this into a really succinct statement, but. I run an excavation company. We own some commercial property, and I do some advising engineering-wise on oil and gas assets. So it's kind of a smorgasbord of work.
And this is new, right?
Yeah.
New job change in the last
last year, almost a year ago, I got a managed move and got pushed out of corporate.
Ooh, okay.
Which is always a fun experience. So I was able to take a few months off towards the back end of the year, which is I'll never forget. That was such an amazing opportunity. I'll never forget that. And then in January, I jumped in helping this excavation company. So it's been fun.
And you were saying earlier, just now things are kind of calming down in the job.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think that's fair. I'm hesitant to say this because I'm like, then what's going to rear its head now?
Yeah.
But it has been a nice little breather here as I've gotten a little more comfortable.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, Shelby, what about you? What does life look like right now?
Yeah, so I've been married to my husband Dane for 8 years in August. And
I didn't realize it's been that long.
Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
Yeah, we've been in Colorado 10 years, and we just had our first baby, a little girl. Her name's Tyler. She's 7 months old. And I work here at the church part-time. So I'm 1 day a week in the office. And then the rest of the time, I'm just keeping this tiny human alive. And so that is
just that.
You've done a good job so far.
Just that.
Yeah, she's clothed, has diapers, food, so we're doing pretty good.
And she's super cute, so you guys did a great job.
She's not just clothed. Hold on. She always has the best outfits.
Yeah, she's got a look. She's got a thing going.
She does.
Very
She
cool
does.
headbands.
She looks like a worship pastor's daughter.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Very
biased,
fitting.
but
A V-neck.
she's pretty cute.
She's very cute.
Yeah. So
Okay, so let's talk Enneagram a little bit. What just briefly, how did you guys find out about the Enneagram? How long has it been, and where did you hear about it?
I've known about it for quite a while. I feel like I first heard about it like in college. You know, we did so many personality types, Myers-Briggs, DISC, and then Enneagram started to come up. But I really got into it probably the last 5 years. I read a book called The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Cron and went through all the different types and was just trying to do some personal development, personal growth, and really fell in love with it and the process of learning more about myself and more about who I feel like God's called me to be as a person. And so I would say the last 5 years has really been my Enneagram journey.
Yeah, we've been studying it a little bit more. What about you, Joel?
It's kind of funny. I was just sitting here thinking about it. I actually remember the first time I ever heard about it. It was through a social media post from Carlos Whitaker. And he was like, they were out at dinner with a bunch of friends and they had been talking about the Enneagram. And I'm like, what is this? And that has to have been 7 years or more ago. For me, it really opened up more 5 years ago. But I did some counseling around the Enneagram, where they used the Enneagram as the primary tool in the counseling. So that was really interesting.
So the reason you guys are on the show today is because we're talking about Enneagram type 1s. So you guys both identify as type 1, right? Yep. What was that? Did you know immediately?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's, well, in The Road Back to You, he kind of gives these blurbs where it's like, if you're a 1, you might have thought these things or felt these things or done these things. I think there's a list of like 15. Literally every single one, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. It's almost embarrassing. I'm like reading my journal or something. Like, how do you know that I think this way? And so, yeah, I was like, this has to be my type.
I read those after I knew I was a 1, but I felt the same way. I was like, gosh, are you going to tell me like what color my underwear is next or something? Like, this is dumb. Mine was more interesting because I kind of matched as a 3 and a 1 when I did the test. And so it was digging a little deeper when it became more apparent that I was a 1. Since then, yeah, definitely a 1.
Gotcha.
Everything pops back to that. And even when, there's been times where I'll be like, oh, maybe. No.
Yeah. It comes back where it's like, no, solid 1.
Yeah, still there.
So, Mitch, I would love for you to walk us through just that overview of type 1. But here are the rules for the conversation today. You guys are free to ask any questions you want. You can interrupt. I think the forum of this podcast is pretty informal in general, and we don't have to worry about being polite. So if you want to say Mitch, you're wrong, just go ahead and, call him out. But if you don't mind starting us off by just what is the type 1? Obviously, we're not going to go into tons of detail.
Yeah.
But go for it.
Yeah. Quick overview of Enneagram type 1. What would actually be really interesting is for it to have you guys describe what you think an Enneagram type 1 is. But I'll go ahead and I'll set it up. And then I'd love to know if you would add, what else you would add to that, just generally as an Enneagram 1. But Enneagram 1's primary motivation is to be good and is to be right. They want to do the right thing, and they want to be seen as good by the people around them. And they really focus on distinguishing between what is right and wrong, what is correct and incorrect, what is good and what is bad. They want to avoid mistakes at all costs, and they want to follow the rules and the standards that have been set. And then they want to make sure other people are also following those rules and standards that have been set. And their primary worldview that they show up with is that they see the world as primarily as imperfect. And it is their job and their role that they've been given to help make it better. they want to help make the world and society better, but they also really want to focus on making themselves better as well. And it's almost like this, I must make the world a better place. How would you guys respond to that? Did anything resonate with you guys in that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think
Yes.
I think it's super accurate. You didn't give it a name or anything. I've heard people say like ones are the perfectionist, things like that. I like better the reformer or the improver, because that really resonates with me, that desire to, make things better. But at the same time, the other piece that I resonate with is that like real connection with right and wrong. And a lot of times it's almost like seeing the world in black and white.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn a lot about the gray space in life because there's a lot of it, but that's not my natural bent. I really am drawn towards like concrete, yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad, really appeals to me. And so, I think you hit the nail on the head. It all sounds
I mean, that improver, reformer, I like those titles better if you're going to give a type a title. Perfectionist just sounds a little bit harsh, but no matter what Enneagram subtype and subtype one with ones, they all wrestle with that concept of perfection and how improvement shows up in their life, which we're going to get to here in a little bit. But anything else you would add, Joel?
I think the only thing that I would add in is the concept of enough. I think most ones that I've been around, they're striving to be enough, or they've got this standard, this level, and they're trying to get there. So it's a little bit more than just being good. It's a huge piece of it. There's like that perfection piece, that ideal. You're moving towards a standard, and you're trying to be enough. And I think
you have incredibly high standards.
Yeah.
For yourself.
I think ideal is a really good word.
Yeah, ideal.
Like idealistic. There's definitely a way the world should be. There's a way, it's no matter what it is, business, work, home, family, yourself. There's always that standard of what it should be or could be.
Yeah.
And then ours is the pursuit of, well, what then do I need to do to get to that?
There. Yeah.
Is it reachable?
No.
Okay.
I would say not.
I unfortunately, I want to say it's reachable. Like that's, otherwise what am I alive for? Like that's, it's a little dark, but that's kind of what you're always churning to get to that level, but it's probably not.
I just didn't know if it was something where it's like, here's the ideal, and as long as we keep hitting that ideal, then everything's okay. But it's almost like, no, there's just that sense of
it's
like,
a constant striving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever gotten there.
Oh, definitely not.
Because I have.
Nick is perfect.
Man, tell us your ways, man.
It's too complicated. I'm sorry. We'll say that for another podcast episode. Okay, so we've been talking and teasing the idea of going into detail on instincts and leading to the subtype. We talked about that in our intro podcast of this series. But can you start kind of unpacking what those look like and how it relates to the type 1?
Just a real quick, brief overview of the subtypes again. So there's 3 different subtypes that can be mixed with the core type. So we just talked about the core type of this being enough, this idealism, this, striving for perfection and make things better. But when that's mixed with an instinctual thing inside of us that wants that really helps us to try to survive in this world, there's this self-preservation. It's really more like, how do I perfect myself? That's how it shows up in an Enneagram 1. It's not as for the self-pres. It's like, it's not about perfecting other people as much as it is about perfecting myself. And then the social is like, how do I fit in this group and in society? And for an Enneagram 1, it's like, how do I know the right way. I know the right way to do things. I am the perfect role model, and other people should really follow me. Because I'm going to show you the right way. And then, then there's the third one, which is 1-to-1 instinct, and which is the counter type. And again, real quick.
Oh yeah, we'll have to dig into those too.
Yeah. The idea of counter type is this is actually a subtype that looks almost different from the normal meme version of what an Enneagram 1 typically is. And they are way more focused on perfecting society and perfecting other people than they are about perfecting themselves. And so that's just this quick overview of that. You want me to dig in? to each one, or?
Yeah, I kind of do, unless you guys want to stop him for anything.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I want to know more.
Yep.
Yeah. So the self-preservation one, again, is really aiming to perfect themselves. And they really almost believe that survival depends on getting things right, and getting things right in my life. And they have a really difficult time with ambiguity and uncertainty, and feel the need almost to like predict what's going to happen in the future, and will oftentimes lead them to worrying about what is going to happen if I fail, what is going to happen if I do make this mistake, and how is this going to impact my future? And so because they're constantly thinking, how do I make myself perfect and show up perfect, it makes it difficult to slow down and to relax, because you're constantly thinking, how do I make this thing better? They're very focused on tasks, but if they only are focusing on tasks, they can come across more as like micromanaging other people, and other people can feel like you're just being a stickler on the details of all this stuff. But you're like, I'm just trying to be helpful. You obviously missed that, and I just want to help focus on that detail on that task. A lot of self-preservation ones will also say that they have a strong inner critic that is constantly, it feels like it's almost constantly berating them.
Joel's nodding his head as you say that.
And it's like,
I hate that guy.
yeah. Do you have a name for him?
I have one of those too, by the way.
At one point, I don't have a name for him. I was encouraged to name him, and I couldn't do it. And here's why: because somebody else was asking me, "Hey, what does the voice of your inner critic sound like?" And I was like, I had a really tough time placing it because it's my voice. It sounds just like me, and so it's really tough to name something that sounds just like you.
Dang.
Wow.
Something else. So I've not been able to name it. But man, he's loud and he's obnoxious.
Yeah, and it's this like, it's berating in terms of, hey, look at that, you messed up again. You could have done that better. What does it sound like for you?
Yeah, it's so I had never been able to place it very well until I had a guy one time, Jared Ellis. He told me straight out, he's like, you can't say anything worse to a one than they've already said to themselves. And that's the truth. You can't say anything worse to me than I've already said in my head through that critic. It's crazy.
So you feel like I am just constantly beating myself. It feels like you're beating yourself up.
Which is, it's a self-fulfilling cycle because you're trying to reach an ideal that you can't reach. And so then that just gives more fuel for the critic to be like, hey, you didn't get there.
Oh, wow.
Dummy. And then you're like striving harder to reach it. And it's just, it just goes in this whole big circle.
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, I jumped in on your.
No, I was going to say, do you feel like you have that inner critic as well?
1,000%.
And it is common for all the three subtypes to have an inner critic. I'm going to talk about them in a little bit different way for each of the subtypes, because I think it sometimes can show up differently for different subtypes. But for the self-pres, it is much more of a critic in their mind to try to help them realize you didn't do that right. You could have done better. You didn't hit that ideal. You didn't hit that standard again. And so that's a big piece of the self-pres. And I read this the other day and would love to hear your guys. And again, I don't know if you're self-pres or what you are, but or what you most resonate with. But the thing I read was they value being right more than being happy. And I know that's like a strong statement, but it's like I mean,
if you're not right, are you even happy?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So you can't be happy unless you're right.
I mean, I think I don't know. That sounds so strict. What would you say?
But it makes sense to me because it's like, if I'm doing the right things or I am right, I should be right.
Yeah.
Like you would think.
But it's a denial of that gray area. Like, can you be happy in a gray area?
It's hard.
Yeah.
My gut says no, but I should probably back off that a little bit.
Yeah. But again, so this is again how this particular subtype shows up more in the world, right? And not that the other subtypes wouldn't resonate with that as well. But this is more a self-preservation concern.
Gotcha.
So that's self-preservation. I'm going to move on to social. And for the social subtype, they really see themselves as the perfect role model for other people and really pride themselves on knowing the right way to do things. And they want to instruct other people on doing the things in the right way. And so they are, they're very skilled and inspirational teachers because they want other people to see them as, look, it's almost hey, look at me, look, I just did this thing the right way, and you can do this too, and let me show you how to do this. And they feel like I'm being super helpful for you because I'm showing you the right way to do it. And it just doesn't always come across as helpful to other people. And when other people don't respond doing the things the quote unquote right way that they want them done, it can really begin to frustrate that social one. Like, I showed you the right way and you should know how to do this. But they have such strong self-control that they actually take that anger and they shove it down. And though they might express that they're a little frustrated, but when they're actually really angry, but being angry is not a proper or right or good emotion to have. So I try to take that anger and I try to shove it down as much as possible.
What's the motivation for that controlling that anger?
It's to appear,
because it's wrong.
It's to appear proper and to appear good. And if I let this anger out, it's almost a fear of what is, of how other people are going to see and view them. Does that resonate? You guys?
That makes sense.
Sense that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So also with the social one, they really, really like to be certain of things, and they want to actually eliminate. We were talking about the gray area. They want to eliminate any gray area. They want to eliminate any loopholes that there could possibly be, so that they can more convincingly support their convictions and their right. But oftentimes in proving that they're right, they're just trying to prove other people wrong. Like they're like, I'm right, so you are wrong. There's no gray area again. It's like, I'm not leaving the door open to explore. I'm just telling you this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. And then they really want the people around them, especially in their closest social circles, to also act very properly and good and right, because that is a reflection on them. And if you're not, then they will step in and try to micromanage or control or educate you on the right way to live. And so that's the social one. And for, the self-preservation one has more of that inner critic in their mind, whereas the social one, it can sometimes show up more as an inner coach. It feels like it's like it's coaching me on how to live rightly, and I must coach other people on how to live rightly. Mm. And so it's very similar but nuanced in that, and they almost hear it a little more positively than beratingly. Mm.
So is it almost like if you have a relationship with the social one, are you going to hear things from them like, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing it this way? Have you ever thought about, is that
well, it's not a thought about, it's like, you should have done it this way.
Gotcha.
Or you could have done it, you could have done it this way. And, I often, when I think about ones there, we've already mentioned these words a few times already. Shoulds, oughts, coulds are oftentimes in the vocabulary of ones. There's a lot of, hey, we should have done it this way. We could have done it this way. You ought to do it my way or this way. Mm-hmm. There's, I sometimes call it shoulding on other people. You're constantly throwing out so many shoulds.
Shelby like that one.
I'm dying because it's so accurate though.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Shoulding on other people.
Yeah. And so you just have to watching that, because even though in your mind, you're like, I'm being really helpful in trying to perfect the people around me or this world or myself. it can come across not the way you want it to come across. So watching those 3 words in particular.
So far, the self-preservation one is going to be a little bit more turned inward with that, trying to find that ideal.
Yeah,
and the
more
social
perfecting themselves.
is going to be, we haven't gotten to the one-to-one yet, but the social is focused a little bit more outward.
Yes. Okay. It's hey, I'm a good role model.
Yeah.
And I'm the model citizen for how people in society should act.
Gotcha.
I have the right way to go. And then we get to the one-to-one, and for them, it's the inner critic is not as much an inner critic or an inner coach. It's almost this inner enforcer. And it's not as much about perfecting themselves nearly as much as it is about perfecting society and perfecting other people. But they feel compelled to, it's almost like this enforcement. It's like in their mind, you see everything that's wrong. And if I don't take action on this, what kind of human am I? And sometimes I think of like, this is like the true reformer. The person who is starting a movement and is going to just constantly beat the drum and move big change forward.
But they're the one that looks the least like a one up front, right? I mean, aren't they kind of? You said they're like the anti
counter type.
Yeah.
Counter. And there's a lot of still one components, right?
Sure.
The motivation underneath it all is the same. I need to make things better. I'm showing up in the world to make it a better place. Deep down, it's because they want to be good and right, or they have an ideal picture of what the world should be. But they are the most likely to just they have the most energy, and instead of like the other 2 subtypes are actually going to put a lid on their anger.
Gotcha.
This lid is off. Their anger is what is actually driving them to make the change. And it's moving them forward to do that.
Interesting.
And so they can actually, oftentimes they get mistyped with 8s because they can look a lot. They're very forceful in the reformation. I often think of like the Apostle Paul is probably a 1-to-1. He has all of the details. He's going out and he's going to reform the world and change the world for the better, for what, and when he was Saul, he was trying to do that, but he was going around arresting Christians and all that kind of stuff. But then when he changed, he's like, okay, now I'm all about Jesus. I'm going to go change the world. And it's just a constant drive.
I think there is something to that too. I've felt the same, and maybe we've talked about this, Mitch, with Paul being a 1. But the other thing I think about 1s a lot, all in, right? And that's kind of like Paul. Paul, when he was persecuting Christians, all in on persecution, and then when he was all in on reaching the Gentiles, it was like, I'm on every ship. I don't, you know what I mean? Like I'm everywhere.
You can beat me. You can do anything me. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's another all in.
All in. No, that's good.
So anything else on that one-to-one?
Because they can come across so intensely and forcefully, people can really perceive them as impatient or pushy, and they're not ready to be reformed. They're like, oh, you mentioned this, how you want to change in this area of your life. Well, let's do it right now. Let's change it then. And
what are we waiting for?
What are we waiting for? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they don't realize, they're blind to how their behavior is actually impacting the relationships around them, because they're so focused on changing and reforming and making things and making people and society a better place to be.
So I'm curious, what are the key differences between that 1-to-1 and an 8? And you said a lot of times they can be confused, but what's the difference?
Yeah. So the 1-to-1 ones in general are much more focused on just making things better. And not that 8s aren't, but 8s are more about how's this like, is this power and control? There's subtle nuances there. The one is going to care more. The 1-to-1 is going to care more about the details of the thing and how all of those little intricacies play into whatever they're trying to change. Whereas the 8 stays more higher level.
They're not going to get in all the weeds.
It's not about the weeds. It's about making, how do I almost orchestrate this army of people to go do this stuff and rally behind me?
Gotcha.
Versus, hey, I am going to go reform this and build a system and do all these things. 8s are just going to, it's not ready, aim, fire for an 8. It's fire, right, fire. Where as the 1-to-1, there still is a little bit more. It's short, but there still is more of a ready, aim, fire.
Yeah, they're kind of more of a sniper, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they will kill you, but it's from a long ways away, and you'll never see it coming.
Wait, who will?
The 1-to-1 one. It's kind of how I see what you're
Gotcha.
saying. It's like just an ultimate level of precision.
Yeah.
Where 8s are like bazookas and machine guns.
Or it's like a knife.
Yeah. Or a knife or whatever they've got.
Close.
Whatever they've got.
I threw another person at you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
This
8s. That's
got
not fair. That's not
really,
fair.
really
Yeah,
does.
sorry. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's some of the
great.
differences. Yeah.
So I would love to know, Mitch, jump in, but I'd love to know, after going through the 3 of these, and I know you guys have been doing a lot of your own study and you've been on that journey, but is there one of those that resonates more than the other 2?
You want to start?
Sure. I think I'm the self-preservation subtype, mostly because when you said like the self-focus, maybe you can clarify this too. It's not just me, but it's anything I feel responsible for. So my home,
That's right.
my family, my job, but I'm not walking into this room and like, oh, Nick, you could really do these things to make your life better. Like, that's not how I think, but I think that about the things that I feel like I'm
responsible for.
Yes, responsible for.
Yeah, no, that's very much in that self-pres category. It's more about the things you have or what you view you have control over or influence with.
Yeah, so I really resonate with that. The other 2, there's things about each one that I feel like I connect with just as a 1 in general. But at the core, I feel like my need to change things or improve things, or it's more about me than it is about the things around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can be more at ease with the gray things if it's not in your specific responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not within my realm of influence or within my personal space.
It's more like you be you. That's fine.
It doesn't bother me as much.
Yeah.
But like with the things that I feel ownership of, I take it really seriously.
How does worry play into that? Do you feel like a sense of, or whatever you want to call it, but is there a sense of worry for you as you're trying to navigate that, like perfect yourself and your things you have influence in?
I think so. I think in different seasons, I feel that more, like becoming a parent. That has been so eye-opening to me. And I feel that all the time with my daughter. Like, what if I do this and I just mess her up for the rest of her life? Or what if I do this thing and, XYZ happens? Or it feels like this huge weight on my shoulder to get it right so that I'm setting her up for success and to thrive. And so there are certain things that will trigger for me more of the worry if I feel like, especially if I feel like it's something I'm not as expert in. Like there are certain things I feel like, oh, I know how to do that. Like I can, kill that, or I'm a pro at this. But with parenting, I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And I need to know what I'm doing. Like that's so important to me. And so that escalates my worry when I don't feel like I have that
Gotcha.
like perfection within my reach.
And little tiny humans don't always do what you want them to do.
She does nothing that I want her to do. She doesn't follow any of my schedules I set up for her.
Uh-huh.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
What about you,
I
Joel?
just accepted a long time ago I am doing harm to my children that will require counseling.
You just set money aside, like, I'll just pay for your counseling later.
I think that's more how I've accepted it. I just can't do it right.
You can use it for marriage, college, or counseling.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yeah, maybe just counseling.
Or maybe just counseling. There's a lot there.
Oh man, I'm complicated. I feel like
Let's hear. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's hear.
I resonate with self-pres, and I think that I would have said before coming in here, I'm more self-pres. But the social one, there's pieces of that I definitely feel and resonate more with too. So it's kind of like I wonder if they kind of go back and forth at times too, where sometimes I'm more operating out of like inward and trying to control me, and I, and then there's times where, cause I definitely do have times where I'm like watching something and I'm like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's not right. Or, oh, you know what I mean? Like I can pick that out. Maybe the step I don't take is I don't feel like I like walk up and be like, hey, you said this, and this, and you should have said this. I don't should on people like in that way. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's not, and oftentimes even with the social, especially if they're not, if they don't know the person, they're not going to most likely not going to take that next step either. But they want to be seen. It's more about, I want to be seen as, hey, I know the right way and I can help people figure that right way out.
Yeah. Yep. I think, and there's pieces of that I definitely resonate with. The other thing that's really interesting for me is that I've got like a major blind spot in that, okay, we go back to the ideal and I'm like, oh, so the way I see myself is way better than I actually am. Right. And so that plays against me. So then there are things I'm convinced, and I can't name them because this is where my wife, Josie, comes in so well. She's an 8.
Let's get her on the phone.
Yeah. Oh,
Let's get her on the phone. I want the real stuff.
When I said I'm complicated, I bet she smiled or went, oh yeah, he is. The thing is, 8s are like truth, right? They're very, very forward, and they'll tell you the truth, right?
Yeah.
And so there are so many times where I'll be like, living my best life, like I'm all good. And she's like, nope. And I go, oh, okay. I need to work on that. So I'm blind to
because you felt
too.
like you reached, or you were at least close to that ideal.
What I'm seeing as in myself is better than what I really am.
Gotcha.
And so where I was going with that is on the social one, I might be worse at this, right? And I ignore the fact that I actually do coach people up, or I go correct people and do all this stuff, right? Because in my head, I'm thinking of that as being a negative, a bad thing. And so I don't want to acknowledge the fact that I actually do that. So, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. And Mitch, you know me, so you might even go, yeah.
I mean, that makes, I didn't have a like how, what necessarily what I thought your subtype was, but that makes a lot of sense in what you're saying. It's priding yourself almost on, I know the right way. Yeah. And this would be a good thing for not just me, but for other people to do.
Yep.
That's interesting though. 'Cause the inner critic part, do you feel that's more like the self-pres or like
he's not a coach.
Yeah. He's not coaching you.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not always like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But with ones, we want it black and white. So I want it either, like it can't be both, right? It's either the coach or it's the,
So you mentioned like that idea of like, going back and forth between the two different subtypes. And I think there's probably one dominant one that we operate out of. Then there's a secondary one that you probably swing to or you pull more from. And then there's probably one that is, what we call like repressed or underutilized, and it's kind of out of range of what you usually swing to. And depending on how those three subtypes instincts stack up, that can actually influence that as well, or how much you utilize. And so those two might be pretty close together for you.
Yeah, I would, if I was classifying them, those two would be really tough to differentiate, but the 1-to-1 would be much, much lower. Like I don't resonate hardly at all with that one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't know how you feel, Shelby, but
Would you, if you had to put them in order, take a stab at it, what would you say?
Can you just be one? I resonate the most with the self-preservation. I feel like probably the other two to me feel like equally like
Almost
maybe
foreign.
not foreign. Maybe I would dabble in those a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm leaving my space very often to go.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Is that when you go back even years ago, or is that like your world with a little baby? You know what I'm saying? Like, I know having a really young one can just be like, this is my focus right now. Or is that you feel that way even years ago?
I guess that's true. I guess it may be, and I don't know if this is a thing too, like, does it change based on your environment? Like, hey, when I'm in my workspace, I do need to tap into more of that, like coaching other people or bringing other people along if I'm trying to cast vision for things, or, you know, where I'm not at home with my 7-month-old, I'm not doing that. So I don't know if it can shift based on.
So these are like three different instincts that we as humans utilize to help us survive and to help us get things done. And so there is this, like, there's the survival, right? There's the social, how do I get this group to do it? So it's you probably primarily operate out of the self-preservation, but when you're in a more of a group setting, you need to access that social side to help them see, hey, this is the right way and the right way we need to go. And so you might use that one more than trying to start a movement and go and reform the world like the 1-to-1 one would potentially. But again, it's like, how it's even thinking, okay, how do you access then that 1-to-1 one when you need it? Because it's part of the instinct that's there, and it's not bad. It's a part of the a goodness. It's actually, how do you bring some of those other levels up as a part of your growth path, and recognize, I need, maybe a step for you is I need to take that step outside of me to see this movement that needs to be reformed. And what is that for you? You know, if your lowest one is the 1-to-1.
So what I've appreciated about the Enneagram is it helps you understand yourself. It helps you, usually, like you said before, it's like you hear all these different points. You're like, oh, that hurts, but it's true. And it can be painful, right? But then also it identifies your motivations for how you behave and how you think. But then there's also, I've heard you talk, Mitch, where it's like it provides a path for growth. Yeah, you mentioned it, but I would love to get into that. It's like, I don't know if you have specific questions that you'd ask for them, but I'd be curious about your stories of, you've been in counseling, you've studied it. I would love to know what that path for growth for you guys has looked like. I don't know if you have a more specific direction.
I was just going to ask, like, do you have like specific strategies or practices that you've dove into what an Enneagram 1 is, and then what are the practices that you're using to help grow in your Enneagram 1 on your own journey, and then I can share some other things to throw out there, but I would love to hear what you guys have done if there is something.
Go for it, Joel.
All right. I'm trying to collect what that looks like. I think one of the things, I think you would agree with this, Shelby, but like I'm always trying to learn and grow, right? And so this is a really tough question for a 1 because the journey is just always there, right? Like I can't even tell you where I'm at on the journey because the journey's always, it's perpetual. But I will say a couple of more on like the tools or some of that stuff. And I went through some counseling on it. One of the things that stood out to me was you talking around how anger goes to resentment, but then, the true, like the ideal for a 1 is more around serenity and appreciating nature and appreciating the perfection in the world around you. And this for everyone who knows me, they know how much I love golf, but that really has become my, like, probably the biggest tool that I have to try to both decompress and then also just appreciate the world around you, right? And so it's kind of it's cheesy because everyone's like, oh, you just use that as an excuse to go out. And well, maybe I do, but there is something to it where when I'm able to break away, and that's been a big piece for the growth for me, is like appreciating and just stepping back to appreciate just the perfection around, instead of always trying to refine and optimize and fix and correct.
It sounds like when you're on the golf course, and usually golf courses are beautiful,
Yeah.
you're able to look at them and say, this is enough. Is that kind of it? Like, I don't have to go out there and make a better golf course. This is beautiful.
Yeah, I think part of it too is that they are so complex. And so as I've learned more and more about how they're designed and the little tips and tricks of how they've put them together, you start to appreciate, how they took bare ground and created this path for that you're chasing this ball down, right? And it's so mundane, but it can be very exhilarating. And just last night I showed Josie Sand Hills, which is in Nebraska. It is literally in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. And there's this aerial shot looking down on, the course, and it looks desolate and desert. And then there's these golf holes. And I'm like, that is amazing. And I would love to do that. I would love to just go walk this and be able to see, and you look at from different angles. And she said, that looks gross. And I said, all right, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
You're like, that's not the word I had in mind.
But so I don't know if this is right, but that's how I've used a tool to try to get myself out of trying to fix it. And maybe I don't know here. Maybe I've just accepted I will not be able to build a golf hole, right? I'm not gonna be able to do it. And so to be able to go out there and just appreciate what someone else did is something that I'm working on.
But you appreciate when things are done excellently.
Oh, yeah.
And when things are quote unquote perfect. And there are probably some courses that you've been on that you're like, whoever designed this is amazing, and it's almost because this is perfect.
It actually then it goes and then it goes into different things, because you can become obsessive, because then it's like Bill Coore and Ben Crenshaw, they make amazing golf courses, and now I just want to play every Coore and Crenshaw course that I possibly can, and that's legit. Like, and then I have played a lot of Coore and Crenshaw courses, and every one of them I'm just like, this is amazing. So it gets to be kind of funny, because when I find something that I view as like done really well, then I want more of that.
Yep.
Yeah. Funny enough, Sandhills is Coore and Crenshaw. So
there you go.
Shelby,
I have a question. You may want to answer the question that's already out there, but I have another question, and you can choose.
Okay.
I want to know from you guys, what do you do with that inner critic? Like how do you silence, and maybe that's not the phrase, like, how do you silence that inner critic when they're just being a jerk? When are you able to recognize what's going on, and what do you do?
I can kind of answer both at the same time, because mine kind of go together. I also did counseling, common theme.
Yeah.
Kind of around this, and we did talk about Enneagram and some of those things. But the inner critic's interesting for me, because and I've had that as long as I can remember, my whole life. But when I was a kid, I would say probably till I was in my 20s, I saw that voice as a friend. I didn't see it as negative.
Wow.
I saw it as, this is helping me. This is keeping me on the straight and narrow. But the voice was harsh. So I see it as the critic, like the coach, the enforcer. That doesn't really resonate with me. It was very harsh, but I saw it as helpful. It's like, this is a positive thing. It wasn't until a lot later in life, when I started doing counseling, some of those other things, that I realized how negative that voice actually was, and how much it was really just beating me up all the time. And so one of the things that we had to do in counseling, and this like legitimately hurt me, I don't know, Joel, if you would be able to do this. Like, it drove me crazy. But one of the things my counselor would make me say all the time when we were talking about, when I would hear that voice, it's good is good enough sometimes. And I hate that. Like, that does not resonate with me at all. It's like, good is not good enough. That it just doesn't, that doesn't jive with me. But she would make me say that.
Why is that important?
Why is it so hard to say that?
No, why is it important? Why did the counselor want you?
To grasp that.
That there's not perfection. There is no perfection aside from Christ and God. It's like, that doesn't exist. And to be able to accept that and to recognize that that's not something I can achieve within myself. It's not something I can work hard enough to get. It's not something I can even really pursue apart from following Jesus. It's like, it's not there. And so a lot of the things I was killing myself to do or pouring hours of work and energy into, I could have accomplished, and good would have been good enough. I didn't need to drive myself to exhaustion or stress or frustration over something that really, at the end of the day, good was good enough. Like, it would have been fine. You probably would have got mostly the same result. Maybe I got 5% better, which to me was like worth all that anguish. But I did that a lot in counseling, and I kind of had to identify a verse or a passage or something like that that would kind of bring me back.
More something centering.
Yeah. So for me, there's a story of a rich man that comes up to Jesus and he says, "Good teacher, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus pauses and turns to him and he says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God." And that to me was like a punch in the gut. Like, that even Jesus would say that. Like, you want to know what to do. You want to know what the rules are. What are the check boxes? What do I have to do to get this thing that I want? And Jesus is saying, that's only found in God. And so for me, I come back to that verse a lot. Like, I think those things a lot. And it really does help me. It changes my mindset a lot. And then the other thing, I told Mitch this, and it's really embarrassing that I have to say this on the podcast. The other thing I've started doing is intentionally making mistakes or intentionally leaving things, I'm doing finger quotes now, messed up. So my husband will probably listen to this podcast. I think he is atrocious at loading the dishwasher. It's literally like I could fit 12,000 more dishes in this thing. It's pandemonium. And I legitimately will open it up. I'll look in there and I'll be like, you have to leave it. You can't move a single dish. Like, just leave it exactly how it is. Close the door, turn it on, walk away. And I have to like physically make myself not change it. Like, I don't need to improve it. It's fine. Like, it's okay the way that it is. And so I've started doing that in just different things, like even work. Like, I had to send a thing recently and there was a typo and I was like, I'm just going to leave it. Like, it was such a small thing. I'm like, I'm just going to leave it.
How did you do that?
It's hard.
You're kind of wrecking me right now.
Hey, Joel, when she was talking,
enough,
you were like fidgeting.
Yeah. When she said good is good enough about 7 times, I about came out of my chair.
I know, it's hard.
I don't know.
It's like physically painful to do it, to not fix the thing.
I understand the like just starting the dishwasher when it's redone or when it's not.
And I don't always do it. Sometimes I do move the dishes if I don't have good self-control.
Now hold on, I have to ask a really important question. Have you ever on purpose put a dish in there incorrectly?
No, I'm not at that level yet, Joel.
The highest level?
Either. I can't do it.
I'm not quite there yet.
I've done it, and then I go back. I'm like, that was dumb, and I go back and I change it to how it should be.
Yeah,
it's to the right way.
Check and double check to make sure it's right.
It's so hard.
Yeah. I love the verse that the passage you just used, because I've never thought about that, and that is gonna like haunt me for days. Because I've read that and I've read it and I've read it. I've never thought about it how you just framed it up. That's so good.
The other one, does this resonate with you either? The story of the prodigal son. I always relate to the older brother.
Yeah,
not the prodigal son. I've always followed all the rules. I've always done the right things.
He did it right.
Yeah, but so the brother's like, I've always been here. I've always been doing what I should do.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, where's my party? So I think it's, that grounding, truth of scripture is very helpful for me. And then the very practical of just like, I have to break myself it's really a compulsion to fix or try to change. And I've found, I don't know if you found this, the people in my life who I love and care for the most, they don't always want my helpful tips for improvement. And they don't see it as helpful. They see it as critical, or nothing's good enough that they're doing because it's not meeting my
expectation.
Yeah, my ideal or my standard. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's like, I have to accept my way is not the only way or not the only right way. And that's very hard.
You know, when we were first married and I was still trying to learn how to do all of the relationship stuff, I did that a lot. And there were so many times where she'd be like, it just never feels like it's enough. You know, like it's never good enough. And I'm like, maybe it's not. Maybe we could be a little bit better, right? Like,
you're like, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, would it hurt to try? And I think that's been a place that I've had to grow a lot, is like realizing that, you know, we don't always have to be making this better. Sometimes this is really good. So I agree with that a lot. I want to answer too on the critic and how I handle it, because I've actually had to do a lot of work on this. And I've found journaling is huge for the critic, because what I have found is that when I allow the critic to just pound on me internally, when I start to write down and actually verbalize what he's saying inside of me and inside my heart and inside my mind, I don't believe it. I start to look at it and I'm like, that's dumb. Like I would never, ever believe this stuff. And so when I translate it from just being internalized to being external, I can deal with it and start to go, that ain't right. That ain't right. This I could maybe get with, but like 5 out of these 6 things are not even right. And that's been really, so when I get into these, I call them death spirals, with the inner critic, where it's just self-sabotage and negative, I start journaling.
Yeah. So John Acuff has a book out now called Soundtracks, and it's the things that are playing over and over in our mind. And he says to ask 3 questions, and I think this is really helpful when it comes to the inner critic, is, you know, writing it down, identifying what that is, but then asking, is it true? Is what this, you know, what I just wrote down, is this true of me? Or is this helpful? Is it even helpful that I listen to this and use it? And then finally, is it kind? Am I actually being kind with myself? And then taking that statement and then being able to rework that into a new soundtrack and rewrite it into something that is true, that is helpful, that is kind to you. And so it's going one step further. With what you just mentioned. And I think, you know, that could be helpful for probably any Enneagram member, but especially Enneagram 1s.
I want to make that practical for a second, because I'm not an Enneagram 1. However, I can relate to the inner critic, and we'll get to that when we get to, you know, the other numbers. But, for example, I think something that I'll hear in a moment that I'm not trying to be intentionally mindful of, but I make a mistake, and it could be something simple, and the first thing that goes to my mind is, what an idiot. Or like, oh, that's so stupid. So to run it through that filter that you just said, is it true? I'd like to think, no, it's not true. I'm not an idiot, right? And what was the second one?
Is it helpful?
Is it helpful? No.
Is it helpful to tell yourself that?
No, not at all. Is it kind?
Is it kind?
Absolutely not.
Right.
So maybe, okay, it's like rephrasing. It's like, okay, what did I do? I left my computer bag at home. You know, so like maybe it'd be helpful to be like, oh man, you made a simple mistake. That's true. You know, just start running it through that filter. I just wanted to make it practical, because I think you start to say that, and it's like, man, we do that all the time. So that if you're hearing those voices all the time, that's going to have an impact.
Yep.
I'm curious, and I would love to, after I ask this question, I'd love to know any other growth suggestions or things that people could do to find greater health. But you guys have both mentioned faith as being helpful. The interesting thing is I think a lot of people have probably approached faith and religion, and maybe even more specifically morality, that's actually made it worse for them. because you think of all the should-haves or all the I ought to, and so many iterations of faith that's gone awry. That's apart from the gospel of grace is like, I'm going to try to be better. I'm going to try to clean this up. I need to do this. I need to avoid that. I could see people getting on the wrong side of religion or ideologies, and maybe their story is faith destroyed me, right? Church destroyed me. I know I'm getting a little deep, but you guys have found a freedom from your faith. So I would love to know, and if you need to take a second to think about this, I totally understand, but what is it about the gospel? What is it about Jesus that you have find to be freeing for you?
I love this.
This is going to be funny because we both have similar Christian kid stories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The first thing that popped into my mind when you made that statement, the freedom in the gospel, it is like, it goes back to what Shelby just said. No one is good but God, but Jesus, God, the Trinity. That's perfection. And so there's like, I don't know if that's exactly where the freedom comes from, but there's like, I don't have to be perfect. He was, he is, and he always will be. And they're like drawing and centering back on that. I think there's a lot in that.
So someone else can carry that.
Yeah. Now it's not easy to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
Like that has to almost like constantly come in. The other thing that I've really leaned on a lot is, I think it's in Romans 7, and Paul's talking like how he's just like, every time I try to do good and I just keep doing bad, and he's in this internal battle, and he just, I think then he goes out of that and talks about how good the grace of God is because of that, how much he needs it, but then how freeing it is that he doesn't have to. I think he even makes the comment, how wretched I am, how wretched of a human I am. And I think about that a lot, where it's like, hey, it doesn't matter. It's like everything I've tried, even when I try to do the right thing and I do the wrong thing, it's like, just, man, how wretched am I? But how beautiful is Jesus and the sacrifice he made.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, to a certain extent, that inner critic, you're basically able to say, hey, you know what? Even if you are right, it's okay. Because I know I'm falling short. I know I'm making mistakes.
I need to do that more. I think that's the other piece of it. I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm going, man, I probably just don't do this all that well. I probably let the critic and let the search for perfection override a lot of that freedom that's in the gospel. What would you say?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in a Christian home my whole life, but I wouldn't say I really started following Jesus till I was in my 20s. And a lot of what I was raised with, really, all the rules and the things that you're doing and following don't really have anything to do with Jesus anyways. It's just Christian culture or, church culture, certain things that I do think to certain people are really off-putting. It's not, those things aren't drawing them in to Jesus, where for me, the hope is really found. And so it's interesting, like at the end of the day, for me, the peace really is in Jesus, because he doesn't have any of those expectations for me. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want me to come to him all cleaned up with my act together with, here's my checklist of everything awesome I've done.
That doesn't impress him.
No,
right?
Not at all. Jesus wants me to come to him with, here's my messy, broken, junky self, and I need you to fix it for me. I need what you have to offer. And I think that's really hard for me at times to recognize I can't do this on my own. Like, I can't achieve these things. I can't work for that. Like, I have to come to Jesus imperfect in order to receive his grace. And he offers it to me knowing that I'm not perfect and knowing that I don't have it all together and I'm a pretty messed up, sinful person. And so that for me is actually really freeing and really beautiful to know that there's nothing I can do to earn that or to work for it. And I don't have to, I don't have to strive for that. I think even in the Bible, it's like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, I actually relate to them quite a bit. It's like they just want to follow rules.
They get a bad rap. Come on, lighten up.
I mean, they're just trying to, lay down the law, enforce that. And Jesus was always at odds with them. Like, Jesus wasn't like, good on you, you're keeping everybody in line. He was always, correcting and teaching and really getting to the heart of why he came. And it was always about people and the people Jesus was spending the most time with, and that he, told stories about or parables about. It's like, those were the sinful people who were humble enough to recognize how much they needed him. And so everything in scripture literally is the opposite of how I, my natural bent, which is like, work hard, strive, do the right things. And Jesus is like, no, that's not going to work.
Come to me. Come to me.
It's funny because it sounds like they're at odds, but I think that's where the freedom is because it's like, hey, I don't have to do all of these things I've been putting so much effort into because he's done it all. Yeah. He's covered all of that. So I agree. You said it very well.
So is it Nicodemus that was one of the Sadducees? Is that right?
That met with Jesus?
Yeah. I went to Bible school, but I can't remember.
I can't remember if he was a
He
Sadducee
came in the night.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't see a Pharisee or a Sadducee?
He was one of those guys.
Yeah.
So, you read through the New Testament and you're like, oh my goodness, Jesus really didn't like these guys. And it's not true. He was pushing against what they had made religion, right? But then the story of Nicodemus, when he came to Jesus with a humility and a seeking to understand, Jesus met him with a ton of compassion and said, it's like, hey, you're with me as well. You know what I mean? So I'd imagine for the ones out there that maybe relate to the Sadducees and Pharisees and they're like, man, Jesus must be really against me. Absolutely not. But against that, seeking that perfectionism in that way of, I can become the ideal all by myself. Yeah. That's what Jesus is like, let's talk about that.
Yep.
Mitch, we are coming up on time, which time flies. But I would love to know, is there anything else that you would share that could be helpful towards, okay, I know I'm this one, and I know I'm this subtype. How do I grow?
Yeah. Just a couple quick things. First of all, I want to say you guys have done a lot of good work.
Yeah, you have.
In investing in yourself and trying to figure out how do I navigate who I am to become a more well-rounded individual, and also allowing the gospel to do its transformative work in your life. And so, first of all, great job. Keep it up. I know maybe you guys need to go home, and when you load the dishwasher tonight, do it all backwards.
Can't.
Just a couple.
No, just a couple.
I thought you were going to reward them and say they could make it perfect.
But thank you.
Baby steps, Mitch.
Okay.
I'm just proud of her that she shut the door and started it without correcting. That's amazing.
And you're hearing the arm hitting the
Literally, yeah.
Just put some headphones on.
And it's like, thank you, Dane, for loading the dishwasher. Anyway, so just a couple other things I would throw out as it might be helpful when it comes to like the inner critic. Not only asking those 3 questions, but don't view it as an on-off switch. You're not going to be able to fully turn that guy off, but maybe it's more of a dial, and it's like taking it more from like a 7 to a 6. Right? It's always there. How do you turn it down? And I don't know, I don't have any like, here's the practice for that. I think it's like, as you're working through it and writing those things down and trying to rewrite those soundtracks, it's how do I dial it down versus shutting it off? Because you won't be able to. So it's a recognition of that. And then something else that I think is helpful to ponder is how do you focus more on being present than being perfect? And because what your families and what your organization and what the people around you are looking for is for you to be present with them and not always trying to perfect them or perfect the moment. And it's looking and being okay and grasping this moment, even in all of its human imperfectionness, because what they're really longing for is your presence and relationship there. And sometimes you can put a barrier. Ones can put a barrier there by trying to perfect them in that moment instead. So anyway, that'd be the other things I'd offer, just as things to be thinking about
That's
positive.
good.
I'm curious if you guys, if there's anything that's unsaid that you've learned that you picked up on the way that you would want someone listening to try, or that you feel like, hey, try this in your life to experience greater health, or maybe just, one more step down the path towards health.
I'm piggyback on you, Mitch, there on that last one, the present over perfect. That's really, really good. And I think I would encourage more of that. I think that's a huge tool because, and especially in today's culture where it's real easy to be distracted, like it's just super easy to take up your phone or to, and just, we just want to be on the next thing, want to go try to fix the next thing. So being present over being perfect is really, really huge. I like that. I don't have anything novel though.
No, it's great. You guys have shared a ton. So Mitch, for anyone listening today that they're listening and they're like, I think I'm a 1, or maybe they're like, oh no, I know I'm a 1.
Yeah.
What's maybe a closing thought that you want them to be able to take away?
It's really I would love for you guys to like, hey, embrace your passion for improvement. I mean, that is one of like the biggest gifts that Enneagram 1s bring, is like, they want to continue to make things better. But in the midst of that, it's like recognizing, how do I balance that also with grace and compassion and empathy and humility, not only for others, but for yourself. Having that grace and that compassion and that humility for yourself as well, and being able to balance that with your desire and passion to improve the world. And I really do hope that you guys are able to find that peace and that freedom by letting go of that self-criticism for yourself and criticism for others, and truly embrace that through Christ, he has made you good, and Christ has made you perfect. And it's from that standpoint of Jesus bringing you into that perfection that you get to go and help restore and reform and improve the world from that standpoint, versus you trying to do it and asking God to bless it. It's God has already done this for me, and now I get to go be a part of what he's called us to do. And so that's my encouragement to 1s as you guys go out. And if you're a 1 listening, I hope that encourages you.
Right on.
Yeah, that's really good.
Such good info. Guys, thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I didn't I know you guys.
The conversation.
Yeah,
I feel like we
absolutely.
could keep talking for hours.
We could. I knew that you guys were smart people, and I knew that you'd done some Enneagram work, but I had no idea how much work you guys had done. So I think the things that you have shared today are really, really helpful for people.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. And our hope is that by listening to these conversations, that it'll help you live out your faith when Sunday's over.